Hi, we'd like to welcome all of you who are joining us for a webinar put on by the United Scholar Academy. It's my privilege to have the opportunity of introducing our keynote speaker for this evening. Kathy Malore is the mother of 6 wonderful homeschooled children. She is the creator and owner of Unleashing Your Voice, a business designed to help people of all ages develop public speaking and debate skills. She has put on public speaking and debate seminars all over the country. This summer, she'll be featured in Virginia as well as right here in California at the conference of the California Homeschool Network. Kathy is a liberal arts mentor with over 12 hours spent mentoring individuals and groups in obtaining truly great education. She has been a friend for many years, and as a mentor for 4 of my own children, has made a huge difference in their lives. So let me now turn this time over to Kathy.
Thank you so much, Candy. I appreciate the kind words, and I'm grateful to be here tonight. I love sharing things about homeschooling and about great education, so it's an honor to have the opportunity to do that. And I hope that as you gather with us that you gain a lot from some of the things that I say. I do want to just give a little caveat that I'm giving like one perspective, if you will, from my own, journey as a homeschooler. My oldest is 22, so I've been homeschooling for about 18 years. And it's important, to know that everybody's circumstances are different and everybody's journey is different, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some principles with you that I hope will be helpful in your journey. And also know that I've, mentored and been a support for hundreds of homeschool families. So when I share my perspectives, I'm also sharing the different things that I've learned from other people. So I have many people that I'm grateful for. So these are my kids, just so you know who I'm talking about. I have 2 boys. They're both adults now, and 4 girls. And each one of them comes with their own genius. Each one of them comes with their own frustration. Each one of them has, a different journey, and their homeschooling paths have not looked the same for each and every one, but there are common themes that they all experienced. So I did want to point out, because I know a lot of people don't have, every ideal situation, that my oldest son, his name is Adam, he has a processing disorder that made learning very, very difficult. I'm pretty sure that his, let's see, the second youngest, I think you guys can see when I'm pointing, this is Stephanie. I think she has kind of the same sort of thing going on. But anyway, he didn't read until he was 12 years old, and I like to tell that story because it comforts people who maybe have kids that struggle with reading, and also because he turned out so fabulous. He has done the hard work of getting a great education. He's starting his senior year in college, and he has, just all the character in the world that I could ever ask for out of a son. So I have different kids going on, with different things going on. My oldest daughter, who's kind of in the middle of the picture, she's also sort of in the middle of life. She's a social queen. Butterfly isn't a big enough word. And she's a musician, and she's a fabulous public speaker. She's a rock in the competitive public speaking world. She plays piano, she plays flute, she's involved in a lot of musical things. And the daughter just below her on the left-hand side, her name's Lydia. She's also extremely musical and sings like, a Broadway star or something. So anyway, they're each different. My son Jonathan was the second son, and he's super shy, and public situations are difficult for him. But he has his own journey, and he's growing and learning as well. So anyway, I wanted to introduce you to my kids so that you know that some of them struggle, well, all of them struggle with something, right? But that they all have geniuses and things that make them unique and make it a joy to be their mother and to be their mentor. So just really briefly, I have a lot to cover, but I kind of want to tell you where I come from. You may recognize this as a cubicle. The theme of my life is I escaped the cubicle. So I was a good student. I enjoyed school. I did all the jumping through the hoops and the taking of the tests and got really good at that. I have a graduate degree and enjoyed the experience. But when I got through with that, I was done with my master's degree and I thought, why do I not feel educated? And it was something like I just couldn't quite put my finger on. So I would try to do things. I thought, well, maybe it's because I know all this stuff, but I can't do anything. So I take classes in, woodworking and flower arranging and just any old thing that sounded interesting. Anyway, it wasn't until I started my homeschooling journey that I started to figure out what it was. And we're going to talk about the difference between having degrees and going through a system and having an education. And it's those principles that engage your children and your teens in their education. And so I'm really hoping that tonight we make some headway on the difference between the two. So this is Copernicus, or I suppose what people thought he looked like. And here's a model of his genius. He was the astronomer who determined that we did not have an Earth-centered universe, that in fact it was the sun that was in the middle and the planets revolved around him. Now keep in mind that when Copernicus had this breakthrough where he was able to prove this, he wasn't the first one who thought it, but he was the first one who proved it. He was ostracized. He was, he was punished, and it was not something that was well thought of. And as a result of that, he didn't exactly benefit from an amazing thing that he did. But something happened. Even though life went on just the same as it always had, I mean, people still got out of bed in the morning and went to bed at night, and they still put on one shoe before they put on the other shoe. Though nothing had changed, everything had changed, because they realized that this thing that they had believed since ancient Greece about the earth being the center, which was canonized basically by the Catholic Church, which was the main authority in the Western world, it was like it rocked their world. It changed everything, even though nothing changed. So my hope is that you have a Copernican revolution in your own mind tonight, that though your life is going to go on just tomorrow, just like it is today, that somehow you'll see it differently. Because that's the experience I had. I came out of a cubicle. I mean, I literally spent 7 years working for a Fortune 500 company in a cubicle. I guess for a little while I had an office, but I had to share it. So only people who've done the corporate America thing can understand, the difference between being in an office and being in a cubicle, but hopefully you get the idea that I was one of many, many people. I was a cog in the great wheel of this organization. And though I, still grateful for the experience, it wasn't a meaningful way to spend my life, and coming out of the cubicle, like I said, is kind of my theme. So I want to talk about education now. I'm looking for a Copernican revolution, and we're going to start with this question, because everybody agrees that education is important. I don't care if you ask an inner city parent, or if you go to a board of education, or you listen to a politician. Everybody says, oh, it's so important, for education is so important. But rarely do you ask yourselves, what for? Rarely is that question asked. Rarely is it in the public dialogue. What are we getting educated for? Are we getting educated so that our kids can be in a cubicle? Okay, that was the path I took. That was even though it was never stated that way, that was the goal of my education, was to get a good job, right? So is that what we're educating for? And if so, what's the best method to get there? But if not, let's talk about that and think about maybe some of the things that might make for a better education than just working towards your place in the cubicle in a Fortune 500 company. So I'm going to share with you this quote. It's a professor who did an unofficial university experiment. He said, "The student's biggest problem was a slave mentality that had been built into him by years of carrot and whip grading. A mule mentality which said, if you won't whip me, I won't work. And the cart of civilization, which he was supposedly being trained to pull, was just going to have to creak along a little slower without him." Okay, so this is a university professor's experience with what kind of education his students were seeking. And it's really important that you think about your own experience in your own education, how much of your motivation was in carrot and whip grading. You get rewarded with the A, you get, punished with the D or the F if you don't move along with the program. So, this was his experience. And then he said, so he took away grades, okay, to just see what would happen one semester. "The purpose of abolishing grades and degrees is not to punish mules or to get rid of them, but to provide an environment in which that mule can turn into a free man." Now that's a what for, okay? We can certainly point to many educational opportunities around us that will make our students, our children, into great mules that pull the cart of civilization. But how many of them turn them into a free man? So this is from a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's a fabulous book on many different levels. I wish I had time to discuss it. So I want to talk first about pedagogy. That word is basically a word that means the art or the science of teaching, methodologies within teaching. And there are many famous pedagogies, things that, most people, especially if you are already homeschooling, you've heard of Montessori, for instance. That's a pedagogy. It's a philosophy about how to teach. But even if you don't have a name for your particular pedagogy, you do have a pedagogy. And chances are good that it's based a lot on what you have experienced as a student. So as I share things tonight, I want you to think about that and ask yourself if the pedagogy that you're currently buying into or that you're currently using is the one that's going to get the results that you want. I'm going to make a recommendation. I don't get any kind of a commission, I promise. This book, Thomas Jefferson Education by Oliver DeMille, is a book which takes some of the best of the classical pedagogies and puts them into a systematic philosophy. Okay, before you read it, let me just already warn you that it is not a method. Okay, so when you read it, you will, most people have sort of a Copernican revolution, okay, and they find that it sort of describes the kind of education that they wish they had had, but it doesn't, but you get done and then you're like, well, how do you do it? And I don't have time to go into all the other resources that are available. At the end, I'll give you my contact information. You can always contact me. But if you read this book, you will find that Oliver DeMille has taken some of the great classic pedagogies and implemented them. If you've ever heard of Erikson's stages of development, he was a famous psychologist that has like a school of psychology named after him. He's taken those developmental stages of childhood and connected them with pedagogies like, unschooling and Charlotte Mason, and there's a book called Teacher in America by Barzun that it pulls heavily from. But it's all been packaged really neatly in kind of a 21st century kind of a way that you can read it in a day or two and really get a grasp on what it is. And I think the what for, when I think about the things that we need an education for, that our children need an education for, these are these are the things that I think we really need to look at, the desperate needs in our world today. We really need leadership in all levels of society. We need people who can lead themselves. All these struggles in society. I mean, a lot of these struggles in society are people not being able to lead themselves. You know, addictions and extreme amounts of debt and all of these kinds of things are examples of people not leading themselves. So we need leadership from ourselves to our families, how many families are falling apart, to communities, to cities, to states, to nations, to the world. We desperately need leaders. We also need people who have the ability to see what the real problems are and to look for solutions rather than Band-Aid fixes. None of this is new thoughts for you. I'm aware of that, but I'm just kind of naming them for you because I want to have it in your mind of what we're educating for. I think it's really important that we educate for virtue, and by that I mean people who have integrity and will do, you know, what they need to do, what they're supposed to do, because it's a trait that's lacking in much of our society. And I think it's necessary for good to triumph over evil, you know, for right to triumph over wrong. So if your worldview allows for good and evil, then I think you probably can see that it's going to take effort on our part for good to win. And then, you know, most importantly probably is just having an understanding of what freedom is and to be able to recognize when those freedoms are being taken away and, like I say in this parentheses, or worse yet, given away. There's all kinds of things in society that have to do with us, just like choosing security over freedom, or choosing, you know, less choices than more, in the hopes of like doing some kind of good with that. So that's the kind of education. That's kind of my list of what I'm educating for. I'm educating entire people. Okay, these children of mine are human beings, and I'm trying to educate all their parts. You know, most systems of looking at a person puts that into 4 parts. You know, their emotional health, their intellectual health, their spiritual health, and their physical health. I can't just say homeschooling and think intellectual. It has to include those other elements so that I'm making, you know, people who are prepared to fix these kinds of problems. I want to have just one more word about vocabulary so that we all, you know, are speaking the same words. When I use the word greatness, this picture is what comes to mind. I have this in a full-size print, like 3 feet tall, in my home because it symbolizes everything that greatness is to me. It's not a great picture, so, you know, this pulled off the internet print of it. But basically these people are heading towards light, and they're walking up these sort of uneven steps, if you will. They're like rough-hewn, and they're uneven, and you might lose your footing on it. But if you'll notice, everybody is turning to help the person behind them. And to me, this is education. This is greatness. This is working towards a better, you know, a better world. So as I talk about great leaders, I want you to know that this is the kind of greatness I'm talking about, because there's other definitions of the word, right? You know, Napoleon, he was a great leader. I came, I saw, I conquered. No, I guess that was Caesar. Both great leaders, but great not this way, great in the look at me, look what I can accomplish. You could argue that, you know, Hitler was a great leader because he got people to follow him, but it's not this kind of greatness. So just so we know, this is what I'm talking about here. All right, so how are great leaders created? So the following lists, the following data you're going to get is from this book that I recommended in the beginning, Thomas Jefferson Education. And Oliver DeMille looked back at great leaders throughout history. He spent a lot of time studying the founders, so he has a lot of his conclusions from them. But he also looked at other great leaders in other cultures and found that all of these greats had these 5 different things in common. They had mentors, they had classics, they had simulations, field experience, and God or a higher power. Now, we just talked about Hitler, and it's important to know that he was the highest power. Everybody in his Nazi organization had a Führer, a boss, except for him. He was Führer with the capital F, and it was the basis of his destruction. So anyway, I don't know if it seems possible to you that you can be a great leader without that, but to me, it's asking for an inability to stay true to that greatness that we just talked about. So I want to quickly just hit on the two that you might not be really familiar with, and we're going to talk about mentors and classics in a minute anyway, but simulations are things where you are doing something in a safe environment, having some kind of real-life experience, but it's a safe environment. So a fire drill is the easiest example to turn to. You're pretending there's a fire. You're doing what you would do if there was a fire, so that when there is a fire, you are able to, to respond. So that's a super simple example, but we use simulations all the time in teaching because they're such a powerful way to find our own strengths and weaknesses, and also to find our own truths. So that's a simulation. A field experience is where you're actually doing something in the real world. So in my business, for instance, right now my daughter Tina is getting field experience working with me. She does seminars with me. She often goes to homeschool conferences and talks with me, usually to the youth, and that's field experience. It's like real life experience under the direction of a mentor. Okay, so there are 3 different kinds of education. I'm not going to be able to go through this entire thing right now, but I'll just basically tell you the main, what the 3 types are and the main things about them. So there's employee education. That's what most of us had, which is we were taught what to think, and we were working towards getting a job, any job sometimes. So it's done in a conveyor belt fashion, and it doesn't take individual needs or interests or aspirations or anything into account. Everybody kind of gets the next step. Okay, you just finished first grade, now move on to second grade, stamp, third grade. So that's why the methodology says conveyor belt. Now, the professional education is teaching us how to be experts and teaching us when to think. So, for instance, I had a professional education I got an MBA in finance, and we were given practicum or case studies where we got to apply what we were learning to a specific company, and know when we see this, then we do that. Okay, so a doctor, a dentist, an accountant, all of those kinds of professions use professional education. It oftentimes it looks like an apprenticeship sometimes too, because you're learning to be an expert in this one thing. Okay, now leadership education is what I'm talking about today. Okay, so leadership education is teaching you how to think so that you can use your ability to think in order to solve whatever problems you come into. Okay, instead of being taught, this factory job or this professional, task, what do you do when you see this? Leadership education has this idea of teaching how to think as the main objective. Okay, so in leadership education, there are 4 phases of development, and in core, which is generally speaking from birth to 8 years of age, the main thing we're trying to do here is teach right, wrong, good, bad, true, false, family, work, play, okay, which is not what's happening in most schools. Most schools have, 4- and 5-year-olds sitting at desks for hours on end, and it's not developmentally appropriate, and so oftentimes, we medicate or whatever. So that's core. And it's best done in your home, quite honestly, that you're teaching values to your kids. Now, love of learning, they're starting to get a little older, and they want to try a lot of different things, and they want to sort of taste, different subjects. And maybe you've noticed when your kids are in this 8 to 12-year-old state that they want to do things like read 100 books on dinosaurs. You know, you take them to the library and you come home with every book on dinosaurs or whatever their particular passion is. But it doesn't last. The passion usually is, you know, is a phase, right? But they're learning and they're loving learning. And when it's done correctly, then they have this lifelong love of learning. And the next phase is scholar phase, and this is my own particular favorite and where my expertise lies. And this is in the 12 to 17 years of age. And during scholar phase, we want them to have an in-depth, you know, education in great classics, and we want them to have the, you know, experience the hard work that learning is. Instead of when they're 5, if we want to do it when they're teenagers and when they're developmentally capable of doing it, and also when their critical thinking and their abstract thinking is in full force. Okay, so that's scholar phase. What it looks like in its ideal is it's all happening during those teen years, and they get 5,000 to 8,000 hours of study in. And it's just like, oh, it's impossible. I mean, that's like 10 hours a day, you know, 7, 8 months out of the year. Yeah, it is. That is what it looks like. And that son I told you about who wasn't reading fluently until he was 12, and even then he struggled, he was doing that, and he did that. He did study 8 to 10 hours a day, and he did it because he wanted to, because he had a love of learning and he wanted a great education. So, you know, it definitely happens. I've mentored many scholars, and I know that that it's possible for them to be self-motivated to do the hard work under the direction of mentors. Okay, that's one thing. Then scholar phase is really important, is that they're being mentored. And then depth phase is when they're, you know, going to college or having an apprenticeship or learning from a particular mentor, say in music or something, if that's going to be their passion and their field, that they're working deeply into one thing. And then that's followed by this application, which is called mission or impact phase. So those are the 4 phases of development, and then this is what it results in is mission or impact. And just briefly, mission is different than job. Sometimes they coincide and sometimes they don't. I'm really fortunate because I have the opportunity to have them be both. You know, that my vocation and my avocation are the same. But sometimes a person's mission is not actually their job, and that's okay too. It's just, you know, a different path to get there. So just wanted to mention that. So there are 7 keys to great teaching, and along the right-hand side I have what's called the 8th key, which is secure, not stressed. And I put it on the side because it's basically about trusting the whole process. And I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. I can already see that I'm running out of time. But at the bottom is what you would do while your children are in core phase, meaning that they're still small. I mean, ideally this is when it happens. You, not them, means you work on your education. You make sure that you're growing and setting the example of learning, and then you worry about their education, because they're only going to get as good of an education as you do. Then in love of learning, these next 3 come into play. Simple, not complex. A lot of curriculums are very complex, and so you never do them. And so we want to have things be simple and enjoyable and real, so as close to real life as possible. We do, in love of learning in our home, we do a lot of library books, just hundreds of them. And so that's simple to get a book, especially if your children pick them out, or you supplement what they pick out, and you just read and discuss. Structured time, not content. You're trying to teach them at this stage that there's a time for learning, and you can actually start this in core phase as well. But in the mornings we learn, or in the afternoons we learn, or whatever works in your family. Inspire, not require is probably my favorite key to great teaching. It's also the most difficult, and I literally could spend 2 hours on it. But basically, you are really going to learn something if somebody inspires you to want to learn it, and you might or might not learn something if they require it. So just that's the gist of it. Quality not, okay, so the next three are in scholar phase. Quality not conformity is when you start to say, you know, I'm sorry, this isn't your best work. I know you can do better than this. You don't do that when they're 5. You do that when they're, you know, 14. So depending on the person. All of these things are very individualized because mentoring is individualized. So quality means I want to see your best work. And the second one up, mentors not professors, is also really, really important. Most of us have had modeled the pedagogy of professorship, where the teacher is giving the content and it doesn't necessarily apply to you, and it doesn't even matter if it does, because this is what's required. You're in my class and I'm professing to you what I know, and you are required to learn it, or the, you know, carrot and whip grading system takes care of you, right? So a mentor is somebody who individualizes education to the needs of the person. And the classics, not textbooks. Okay, classics are great works. They are sometimes books, and they are sometimes other things like paintings or sculptures or works of music or people. I have classics in my life that I love to learn from. Okay, textbooks are something that somebody else has decided what's important, and they've digested it and put it there for you. Okay, that's what a textbook does. It takes pieces of it. So my most vivid example from high school was when I learned about the Civil War. I saw the paragraph on the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. When I left the cubicle and came into self-education, I read Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it changed my life. It changed my perspective. It changed, you know, me in my core. The book got through me, if you will. So a classic can do that. A textbook just doesn't. Okay, so I will say that in all of these nots, classics, not textbooks, mentors, not professors, you really can put an and. Okay, because there are things that are easier to learn through a textbook. But are you the master of the textbook, or is the textbook the master of you? That'll tell you whether you're on a conveyor belt or not, whether you're taking responsibility for your education and your children's education. So there are times when you want to have a professor. You know, you want to bring in an expert on something to learn from them, or you want to go to a lecture at the local college and learn from them. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the same as what great leaders have, which is mentors. So those are the 7 keys, 8 with the secure, not stressed. Just trust the process. When you know it and apply it, it works. There are 5 environments of learning: colloquial, lecture, tutorial, coaching, testing. I want to make sure I leave time for your questions, so I'm just going to leave those for you to learn about another time. They each serve a different purpose, and they each have their place. And as we grow our mentoring skills and abilities, we know when to apply which. And also our perspective on them is really important. Testing, if you went through a public school experience or even a private school experience, I've had both. I've had public school, private school, and professional school. So you've been tested, but a perspective of a mentor on testing is it's about learning what your students know and learning where you didn't do a good job teaching. Okay, so testing has a different connotation when that's the case. So I'm going to ask you this question: did you buy into this lie? Study hard and get good grades so that you can get into college where you will. Study hard and get good grades so that you can get into graduate school where you will study hard and get good grades so that you can get a job in a cubicle where you will work hard so that someday you can retire. It's a lie that I know my generation was fed full force. I know that it was so deeply ingrained that I never even questioned it. But I'd like to share with you a different vision, because I've seen it and I've been a part of it, and it's just so exhilarating. This is a generation of amazing youth who receive an education which teaches them how to think, educates their hearts, minds, and souls, and prepares them to lead in their lives, families, communities, churches, businesses, and nations. And this is the reason why, so that they can be the ones who create Copernican revolutions and fulfill their own personal missions. Why are they here on the earth? What can we do to get them ready to be that person so that they can think and see the solutions that need to be made and get all of those, you know, those things we talked about earlier, all those problems in the world that we all just feel uneasy about and don't know what to do. Let's prepare them for that, for those eventualities so that they can have impact, because that's where we get the most joy out of life, I think, is when we're having impact on others. So I'll just end with this. If the things that I've said today resonated with you, like, yeah, that's the kind of education I want for my kids, or yeah, that's the kind of education I wish I had, then I suggest you start with this book, Thomas Jefferson Education, and that you start working on your own education. Find mentors. Find people who can help you in your own educational journey. And I really, really can't say enough about having a community to support your family. We tried to advertise this heavily in San Diego. I know it went out on Facebook, so you could be from anywhere. But if you're in the San Diego area, United Scholar Academy would love to have an opportunity to rub shoulders with you, to have you mentor our kids and for us to mentor your kids. I've given you my email address here, unleashingyourvoice@gmail.com, and also our website, unitedscholarakademy.org. And if you want, I have a couple of webinars that I give out for free. One is on leading colloquia or discussion for transformation, and the other one is some lessons that I learned from Michelangelo. I studied Michelangelo and recently did this was about a year ago, did a free webinar on that. So if you contact me at unleashingyourvoice@gmail.com, I'd be happy to send those to you if that would be of help to you in your journey of educating your kids. And like I said, we would love to get to know you. So if anybody has any questions, I know I would love to field them, and I'm hoping that Candy will be able to put in her 2 cents worth as well. She's one of the best mentors I know. Your journey as a homeschooling parent, whether you've begun it or you're thinking about doing it, is going to be one of the most satisfying things in your life. I would never have just chosen to do this. My oldest son, it was just the right answer for him. I was still kind of on the cubicle world when he was born, and that seemed important at the time, that climbing the ladder thing. And I learned differently. I learned that because I knew this was the right option for him, that it really became a lifestyle for our family, and one that we just have never regretted. Okay, when a scholar's behavior does not match his stated goals, what are some suggestions for mentoring through that? That's really super broad, but I'll throw out my first thought when I first read it, and then maybe you can ask a follow-up question. If you're having regular mentoring meetings with your scholar and asking him, what are your goals for this week? What are your, how did your last week go? Is there anything I can help you with? You're facilitating his education, and making sure that your children own their own education is key to great mentoring. But you're facilitating it, and if week after week he's coming back and saying, yeah, I didn't do that, and then setting the same goals or the same kind of goals, I think the most powerful question you can ask when he comes back with another, yeah, I didn't do whatever it was that he said he was going to do, you just say, how is that working for you? And get him to own his own choice to be, in the cycle of mediocrity. Instead of choosing the hero cycle, which includes overcoming obstacles and reaching your objective, the mediocrity cycle just continues to fail. And he may come to his own roadblock. He may say, yeah, I just can't because of X, and then you can discuss it. So asking that question, how is that working for you, is a really powerful way to get him to self-evaluate, instead of a lot of times parents fall into the nagging role, and it's just super ineffective, and if you can get them to own it, that's just way better. If I have a child past the core phase, can we still do core with that child? What a great question. Absolutely. If you feel like that child is still missing some fundamental core things, then spending time in that is vital, because we don't want to give a great education to somebody whose core is not solid. I mean, it's like giving fire to a pyromaniac or something, right? We want to make sure that their core is good. And actually, I should probably say that in all those phases of education, the importance of staying in the previous one. Even when we're scholars, we want to do things that help us keep alive our love of learning. And even when we're in our impact phase, we want to do the things that keep our core strong. So it's not like you leave one phase and go into the next. It's more like you build on to the phases. So good question.
A scholar whose stated goals are not matching his behavior, I think also we can introduce some things that would inspire him towards those goals. You know, whether it be taking him, exposing him to something that would spark an interest or remind him of why he had those goals, and anything we can do to inspire that is also really helpful, I think, too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Candy. So I didn't realize that the questions were scrolling. So how would you teach a child math and love of learning? Well, like as closely connected to real life as possible. That would be my basic suggestion. I think that there's you know, some basic fundamentals in math that can be learned just through cooking and allowances, or however you handle money in your family, getting them to save a certain percentage and that kind of thing. You can kind of teach those, I'm just going to call them pre-algebra skills of decimals, percentages, and fractions. So in love of learning, you can make those real life experiences be the math curriculum. I think it's also super important to teach patterns. Some of the ways that we do that in our home. I love this game called Set. It's just S-E-T, and it's got different shapes, and you have to be able to spot the sets to pull the sets out. Chess is a really good math building skill. Rummy Cube. I mean, there is a lot of Yahtzee. There's a lot of games that have numbers as their basis, and you know, I mean, every family's different. I don't say that I'm the best math love of learner teacher in the world, but I just try to make it as real life as possible. My girls that are sort of core / moving into love of learning, they like to go on walks with me, and so we do math drills sometimes while we're walking. They like it. It's like 2 + 2 = 4 + 4, you know. So we're just walking along doing drills. We also play logic games, category games, and things while we're walking. So I just try to incorporate as much math and learning into their lives as possible. How can
and along with that, there's all kinds of great books that you know, love of learning books that you can find that tell stories that include math, you know, right along with it. They don't even realize that they're learning.
Yeah, so. Yeah, absolutely. Like Circumference and the Round Table. I mean, that's just like fun stuff. There's actually tons of books. We do that at the library all the time. I think a library card is probably your most important investment. You'd save a lot of money on curriculum if you used your library card a lot. Okay, so there's another question. How could a parent be a mentor when the idea of education comes from a parent? Is not a mentor someone that your child picks as someone they admire and can learn from? That's a great question too. So there's different kinds of mentors. First of all, you are a parent mentor. So no matter whether you send your kids away to a school or you teach them at home or whatever, you're responsible to mentor them. I mean, it's your job. You're raising them. So you always remain the parent mentor no matter what. During love of learning and definitely in Scholar, you want to get outside mentors. Absolutely. I told you about my 2 musical daughters. I am not musical, like at all, but they are passionate about music. Now, how does that work? Well, it's called I have great mentors in their life. And like my second daughter, Lydia, she's just taken an interest in art. So I happen to know an amazing art mentor, Angela Creel, and got her hooked up. So you absolutely facilitate the finding of mentors. You absolutely want to encourage them to choose other mentors that maybe will help them get to their goals. If they have an entrepreneurial bent and they want to go in business when they're 5, you want to keep your eye out for somebody who can spark that if it's not you. So there's more than one kind of mentor within either of those categories, but it's just important to remember that overall you're the parent mentor, and your role is crucial because you're overseeing the whole thing. I can't expect all 4 parts of my children to be watched over by anybody but me and my husband. So you want to have great mentors available for them, and you also want to teach them how to find their own mentors when they're older. When they're like 15 or 16, they're usually ready to move into what we call self-directed scholar phase, and that's a great time for them to find a mentor outside of the ones you've selected for them. Well, thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I hope that you've learned some things that have been helpful to you. Anytime you want to contact me, I'd love to hear from you, and maybe point you in the direction of what your family needs next. If you're not in the San Diego area and you are looking for a community, I know people all over the country, and I know the person who knows everybody around the country, so I can usually connect you with somebody.
We'd like to thank Kathy for sharing with us these great educational principles tonight. And I'd like to add my voice to that as we implement these principles in our homes, our education improves and our children progress. We'd love to have you join us at United Scholar Academy for our homeschooling classes and support group. And we meet on Wednesdays. We hope to have you join us soon.